Hello fellow Guardians and welcome to today's video. In today's video I'd like to be talking to you about a specific RE, and that RE is Spell Shredder. And if you for some reason don't know what it does, that's because it's not at all popular in any form. Frostbolt will grant you elemental overpower Frost, Fire will give you elemental overpower Fire, and Lightning Bolt will give you elemental overpower Nature. Should you have these buffs, the ability Overpower will consume them to grant you Spell Shredder of each elemental type for 24 seconds, and that buff will give you 10% of your attack power's bonus spell damage, and you can have each version on at the same time. Additionally, Mortal Strike will deal additional elemental damage for each Spell Shredder buff active. And once you have these buffs on, Rend will apply Elemental Rend for each Spell Shredder buff currently up, dealing that damage's elemental type over time and increasing their damage taken from that specific spell school. And you can have each dot on a single target. The thing about this RE that I wanted to talk about is that it, in my honest opinion, is that it's poorly designed, and that it doesn't at all know what it wants to be. To start off, it wants to be a hybrid build with all of these different elemental types for spells, and that it gives you attack power as bonus spell damage, which is very normal for hybrid builds. Next, it has a consuming ability, which feels kind of bad. Even with max CDR, you can only get it down 2 seconds unless you're waiting 3 seconds, which means you either have to wait the small amount of time for it to come back up, or use another thing and possibly go over with the GCD. The next thing is that it also wants to be a dot build, in which each Spell Shredder buff will allow your Rend to apply an additional dot. That is basically a bleed, kind of, but I don't think benefits from some, if not most, bleed modifiers. And the rotation needed to get all of the buffs is super long and convoluted, so you can't really be expected to get them up pack to pack for mobs and dungeons, and it's only really safely viable for bosses, and as far as I'm aware, that at least I've personally used, its damage isn't super great, which I only got to like halfway into TBC at like 63 or something. But just it also wants to be a physical build because Rend itself does not deal any additional elemental damage. Granted, bleeds aren't mitigated by armor, but Mortal Strike is, and as well as Overpower. They don't get any kind of conversion or bonus damage, bonus physical damage or anything like that. So, that and Overpower and Mortal Strike both deal percent weapon damage, which is another thing. The most efficient way of getting all of the Spell Shredder buffs is to use Maelstrom Weapon and assumably fast attacking weapons, and possibly Brain Freeze if you wanted to go that route for the chance of extra things being instant cast and no mana, which kind of helps, though I didn't really have mana problems that heavily. And then the next clash would be going dual versus two-handed. Rend and all of its elemental versions will scale off of weapon damage and attack power. Meanwhile, dual wielding is just for the ability to stack Maelstrom weapon stacks faster. So it's like, get the buffs up faster and do shitty damage, or get them up kind of slower and deal way more damage. Another thing that I didn't like is that pretty much every Shaman enhancement is very applicable for this, but none really outshine everything. So it's just kind of like you can pick what you want, but it still doesn't feel good, because then you're just like, oh well, what if I did this instead, that instead? I would say it's probably best played on free pick, but even then it's still probably just kind of whatever. And then what was my last point? Oh yeah, the two-handed thing. Even if you didn't want to go dual wield, your best option, even if you decided to pick two-handed, would still be to rely on Maelstrom weapon stacks. But I found getting a few Maelstrom weapon stacks and then just self-casting it was the fastest way to get the buffs up, but it was still just suboptimal ultimately. And then once you started like wanting to pump damage, then you'd go into things like Storm Strike and improve Storm Strike for the debuff, and then just maybe Curse of the Elements since it's increased damage taken. Another thing I didn't like is that just you have no idea what scales off of what. The Elemental Shredder Rend dots, like, they have weapon damage scaling, but it'd be nice to know if they like scaled purely off of attack power, or if they get any of the bonus spell damage from any attack power, spell power scaling. Same thing for Mortal Strike, and to just be able to know what bleed talents work with it, because it's like they're a bleed. They're called Elemental Rends, but they're not really bleeds, so I don't think Trauma works. The talent that lets Rend crit and gives a crit chance, I don't know if that works. The one that lets Rend scale from melee haste, I don't know if that works. Feels like it is sometimes, but I feel too inconvenient to, you know, go through talents that fast and build that fast to test it out super high. And while the altar is up, In for the Kill specifically states it doesn't work with Spell Shredder, in which, you know, it's probably the best working RE for it, since like you can have Bloody Maelstrom and, you know, some other things that are just kind of whatever, and there's nothing that really stands out. Being able to increase the duration of those and, you know, refreshing the duration would make sustaining them a lot easier. Another thing is I tried Blades of Blood, which after you charge, Whirlwind applies Rend if you know it, and increases its max hit cap by 5. That does not apply the Elemental Rends, and the talent... what is it? Juggernaut. That when you charge your next Mortal Strike, applies Rend if you've learned it. That also does not apply the Elemental Rend things, so you don't really have any AoE capabilities whatsoever unless you're just doing pure warrior. It feels like no matter which side of the RE that you want to focus on, if you could specialize inside, that no matter which one you pick, it's wrong no matter what. In my opinion, it should be reworked or just made a lot easier to sustain and get the rotation going. I personally would like, instead of it being, you know, Frostbolt, Fireball, and Lightning Bolt, for it to be the Elemental Shocks instead, considering they'd be instant cast. You know, you don't need Brain Freeze or Maelstrom Weapon and stuff like that unless you like super wanted it for something specific, like maybe Chain Lightning. And then for the consuming part, that could be changed so that the shocks could just give Shredder directly, or just like if you had to do the consumption thing, that each time you used a shock that gave you the overpower buff, it would reset the cooldown of overpower, or just to give it a new mechanic where, you know, after you use it, you can use overpower and then it can stack to 3 times. But the best probable way of doing it would be they give you, or the 2 best possible ways would be they give you elemental overpower, all of the buffs can stack, and then you just overpower once to get all of the Shredder buffs, or just that each elemental shock gives you the respective spell Shredder buff just right off the bat, and you know, you're just waiting on global cooldowns to, you know, ramp up as fast as possible. Mortal Strike doesn't really need to be changed at all. The bonus elemental damage is quite nice and hits very hard. Another thing that I learned is that each elemental rend that you apply has a chance of missing or being dodged or parried or blocked or whatever, and that sucks a dick because it forces you to reapply it just over and over, which takes even longer to get to max rank. Oh, and there's one thing that I just remembered that I wanted to talk about too. Fuck. This guy wants to do me for the daily, I guess. Which is fine, or whatever. Do more damage and Sinister Strike, since I can just use it easier. Oh, there was fucking... Oh yeah, and if Overpower gets, you know, misses or is blocked or dodged, then it doesn't consume the buff anyway. Which means you also have to wait 3 seconds for the cooldown to do it again and hope that you don't miss. I'd like to see there be some kind of, you know, AoE use. Because if it's going to be a single target RE, then it needs to do that extremely well, and it just doesn't. Another thing would be that just on the RE description itself, it's a wall of text, and it isn't super descriptive at all. So I'd really like that to be fleshed out, especially considering you have things like Beast and Blade, and Lava Sweep, Night of the Eclipse, and another one I don't remember. That all just basically, you know, they tell you what you're getting, what obviously scales off of what, and just how it's going to work. And this just does nothing. At least he's being a good sport about it. I think that's everything. Oh yeah, if it were changed to shocks, then the Swashbuckler RE for reducing the cooldown would be usable, as well as, you know, the melee haste one in general if you actually wanted to do the Maelstrom weapon. That would just be nice to have an official, you know, shock RE, since people want one, or at least a legendary one usable that melds well with Swashbuckler, and this would do really well. I guess I could refer back to my Discord post to see if I missed anything, because I did put it in suggestions. That's a fucking massive wall of text up. Oh, there it is. Yeah. Letting Ren scale from spell power. The elemental bleed should scale off of most, if not all, bleed modifiers and spell power as well to keep the hybrid aspect intact, since hybrid builds are fun if you know how to build them. I did suggest reworking it and calling it Elemental Hemophilia to lean into the bleed aspect more, since I do think a bleed, you know, like a magic or elemental type bleed build would be super interesting. Having it, you know, definitively decide whether or not to be two-wheeled or two-handed would be good. I guess if you were to use Swashbuckler, it wouldn't matter. And the fact that if it was shocks, it wouldn't matter as well. So, you know, it would be actually pick your preference and it wouldn't matter, instead of it severely determining what the hell you're doing. But yeah, I think that's it. Just, it has a lot of clunkiness that needs to be removed, and or a lot of quality of life given to it, improvements given. If you have any ideas or have different opinions on Spell Shredder, like maybe you're one of the people that actually, you know, make it work and it's super broken or something in TBC now, let me know your opinions and changes and stuff like that in the comments, as I genuinely would like to hear what people think about it, because no one plays it at all apparently, and if they do, they're now making videos about it. When I checked on YouTube, there was literally 3 of them, as far as I could tell. One from McDoubles making a tier list video that didn't really go in depth, just saying that he played it and it's A tier for some reason. A DPS showcase in Mal'Ganis from his free pick, and the other one was a guy building it as agility, which I don't think there's anything wrong with, you know, leaning into the shaman side, but just overall, for being hybrid, strength would be better, since you get, you know, a double attack power per point of strength. And just Storm Strike, I don't think scales with strength at all. If it scales with attack power, then I don't think it has any flat value to boost that high. You know, just weapon damage. So I don't think it would even scale with attack power that well. And you don't really need the crit from agility, you just need good sustain, which is what Doc Build is. Unless you like fucking snapshot damage with like 100% crit chance or something. And yeah. So that'll be it for today's video. I can't wait to see like all the discussions and stuff in the comments. Subscribe if you're new, or if you're old, as it helps the channel out. And you can always change your mind later. I'll leave a comment, as I like interacting with all comments, even if it's not related to discussing the RE. And always remember to be better today than you were yesterday, and I will catch you guys in the next stream, or video if it's something really horrendous. The way that you'll know that this RE is good is that I'll be playing it again, and so will, you know, hopefully people in droves and armies and stuff like that, because it'll actually not be dog shit. See ya.